recording, but you can wait a minute. It's on the tripod right here. Yeah. We're making it work. Yes, here, prime example of how we last month we were using the Kleenex box to prop our cell phone on there, so we have stepped it up a little bit. Anytime you, I mean, it's 5:59 by my clock, but you're welcome to start.
Okay. Well, let's call to order the council workshop for Wednesday, June 17th. This is budget 2021 budget discussion, and I'll turn it over to Jenny to get us going.
This going. Good evening, City Council. Thanks for being here tonight, a little bit early, to talk about our proposed, back of my head is not the thing. Perfect, okay, and let me get this slideshow going. I had it on. So I prepared a short presentation that will mirror the information in your packet tonight. I know that there's a fair amount of information, and I want to kind of focus in on a few areas for you to help start us off as we kick off our budget season here. Tonight, my goals, and certainly if you have other things that you would like us to discuss or talk about, really just getting any overall budget and levy comments, feedback from the council. If you have any just initial goals for us to, for staff to aim for, to bring back at our next meeting, things to put together, certainly want to hear that. And then we'll talk about cost of living for wages and health insurance, information that we have thus far. And if you have feedback for us on a direction you'd like us to do, you can certainly provide that as well. Hi, Nancy. So I usually recap at the beginning of every, let's get back if you want, every budget season, just to recap the timeline and the process. So June, July, we usually kick off our budget workshops. And July, August, September is when we kind of get into the meat of the budget and levy discussion. By the end of September, the city has a deadline to certify a preliminary levy to the county. That sets our ceiling, and so we can't increase our levy at that after that point. But we can always lower that if we deem that that is what we're looking to do. We did that last year. We set a preliminary levy a little bit higher, just not knowing a few things, and then we brought it down before the final. October, November, December, we continue to work on the budget with whatever items that we need to fill in the gaps or for waiting for information. Last year we were waiting for contract negotiations to get completed, that type of thing. And around September 20th is when we need to certify our final levy to the county for the following year. This next slide just gives you more of a visual of the process and the timeline. We spend a good half of the year working through the decision-making process for what the following year's budget will look like. And an important consideration for most cities is really what does that budget and levy look like, and how will we get through the first 6 months of that following year before we receive a first tax settlement payment, which happens at the end of June. For us in Nisswa, we have a healthy reserve fund balance, so we're not worried as much about that cash flow impact that oftentimes cities are, but it's certainly something to keep in mind, especially once we get our audit results from the prior year, see where things are, and then as we get into the next year's budget season. So our fiscal year is the same as the calendar year, January through December. And we do have 2 points in time June and December when we receive our major tax settlement payments through the county. So when we start off our budgeting process each year, we think about what our revenues and our sources of funds will be, our expenditures and how we're going to use those funds, what programs are we implementing, what are we changing, those types of things. What our future long-term planning needs are. So not only are we looking at the next year's operating budget needs, staffing, supplies, equipment, that type of thing, but what might be coming up in the next 2, 3, 5 years. So we should be considering those needs and trying to keep in my goal is to keep as level of a budget and levy as we can, so we're not yo-yoing back and forth too often. Something we probably could work on doing a little bit more and is probably not inconsistent with other cities, but how do we incorporate the comprehensive plan into our budget process? And what's the right timing to do that? Comprehensive planning provides us long-term strategies and goals for the city to implement different things, and usually with that comes resources and dollars to make those things happen. And so that would be something that I would like to see we either initiate more in the fall year-end planning for goals for next year, and then how do we start to really incorporate that into our budgeting more longer term over the next few years. So then the other thing I start to think about are the knowns and the unknowns for budgets. For 2021, we know we have 2 city union contracts. One of them is settled through 2021. That's our supervisor contract. And an average settlement is an average of 2.25% cost of living for 2021. We received a notice from the League of Minnesota Cities that our property liability insurance will be increasing between 5 and 10%. They will have more information for us over the next, in the next couple of months. So what I have done is I have instructed all the department heads to include a 10% increase in their budgets for now. And hopefully we'll get better news that it'll be lower and we can adjust, but I didn't want to start short and have to increase. So good evening, Councilmember Johnson. And the other known we have is that our debt service for our city's general obligation bonds is flat for next year. So we won't have any increase for the city side of things. We have obviously our sewer expansion project coming up, but that bond runs through our sewer fund and doesn't impact the general fund. Some of the unknowns for our 2021 budget at this point in time is our police contract ends this year. And so we will be negotiating with them at some point here, late summer, I would assume it's typically the time.
Can we just do that? Can we just do that?
Supervisors.
Oh,
So police officers are on a separate.
gotcha.
Their current contract was a 3-year contract. I don't know if they'll want to negotiate a 3-year or a 2-year, or I can't imagine a 1-year, but we'll work through those logistics when that process starts. Property taxes, timing of collection, as you've probably seen that the county has done, is I'm guessing most every county in the state has done, is allowed for some time delays for payments of taxes for commercial properties and things like that. So as we receive our first half settlement at the end of the month, it'll be really interesting to see how that impacts us as far as we have historically received well over 90% of our tax payments on time. We have very little delinquent tax payments, but that might look different. And it's not a concern at this point as far as when the money comes in because we have reserve funds, but it's really just more going to be an indicator for me as far as how COVID is going to impact potentially for the next few years.
We don't know any firm dates.
Firm dates as far as
When the receipts will come in, got any guidance?
they do come in. Whatever has been collected will come in around June 30th is the standard. I don't know what that difference will be as far as who's applied for there's a waiver or some extension for payment. So we'll kind of assess the typical amount we get and then see what that difference is. And again, not a concern for 2020, but just more of looking long term on how if we need to adjust further with our budgeting process, how that might look in 2022 and beyond. Property valuation increases or decreases. I expect that our overall market value for the city will increase with the adding of the Grandview development that will come online. I think just about all of it should be online here this year. So I don't expect a decrease, but those would be the things we think about each year for budgeting and what that impact will be. We'd like to continue to see growth so that more of a share in the levy part of that, so that we have more to divide out. Yes.
Question kind of along those lines, was the county's tax abatement meeting, wasn't that just the other day?
That was, yes, Monday night, yes.
Did you heard anything from it? Like
Yes.
the Grandview decisions?
Yes, so the county board approved a change. So they made kind of a unilateral change as far as seasonal properties going to commercial if they were being rented out. What the county board said was if you have information to show that you rented for less than 180 days, they reclassified back to seasonal.
Okay.
So there were a majority of those properties that were reclassified back. I think there were some that stayed commercial. I did ask Sam from the county if there were properties outside of Grandview that were reclassified that just didn't think to ask the question, more just to know what that looked like, and I haven't heard back from him yet.
Then they also categorize VRBOs as well for county tax, I think, but I don't know if that trickles down to us or not.
They passed the ordinance.
Yeah.
Is that what you're referring to? Yeah, their
Or
board
they
meeting.
have to register, pay taxes on their VRBO.
It's a license.
Is it?
Yes.
I don't think it, at one point, they were talking that if you had a VRBO, it would switch to a commercial tax. I don't think they did that.
Okay.
No,
It's
and
just
that's
a
going to be more of
license.
a Department of Revenue decision from what I understand of that. So that's less to do even at the local level. But the ordinance doesn't take effect until 2021. So we'll have properties impacted by that, but it is more of a registration
Yeah.
component mechanism to just be able to track that. Yes. I did also include on my list of unknowns the spirits lease renewal. I know that's really not accounted for in the general fund. It's in the liquor fund. However, I think that's a significant thing that needs to get done and scheduled to get done later this year. And potentially there could be costs for that. And so it's just a big unknown and question mark for me right now. I'm hopeful that I don't have any reason to be concerned that we can't work something out. I think we like the location and everything, but for me, that's still, because I don't know much about how that will go, the question mark.
Jenny, the CARE funds from the pass-through from the federal government,
Yes.
I've heard as high as 220 to as low as 122. Have you got any information on that?
What I know is that the current estimate for Nisswa is 185,000. And basically you get the money, but you have to document what you actually spend. And then at some point in time, you have to send back what you don't spend. It has not been approved by our legislature yet, though.
Was there a deadline on it? Someplace I saw the end of June for some deadline.
I believe it's the end of the year. I believe it's end of December, because I guess I would certainly hope that. to
I
be
thought
the
it was
case, but-
the funds needed to be dispersed by the end of June.
Actually, yes, I think you're right.
Then you had till the end of the year to spend.
Yes, you're right.
That was right.
So with the end of the special session set for Friday, I believe they're trying to get some things hopefully checked off the list, this being one of them. So we've had some expenses, certainly, and certainly would appreciate being, compensated for that to kind of recoup that, but nothing significantly, not large dollar items at this point. But again, how long this lasts, you don't quite know. So So we'll jump into the 2021 projected wages. And I did provide, like I mentioned in your packet, a lot of information, but I'm just going to focus on a couple areas. So there's a chart in your packet. And what I did was I prepared 5 different scenarios. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that I ran scenarios starting at 0% cost of living all the way to 2% cost of living. All of the scenarios include step movement for staff. So if they're not at the top, they would get their step. So I wanted to make sure that you understand that. And then really, I think the best association for the council will be the column on the far right, which is the percent of budget. So you can see, for an example, if I look at the 1.5% cost of living for the general fund and I go to the far right, it's right about 1% of the budget. So it helps to give you sort of a, well, what does a 0.5% cost of living or a 2%, what does that look like? We talk a lot about budget percentages and especially levy percentages. So that should help associate that. I did mention in your packet too that 1% of our levy is roughly $25,000. Our budget's a little bit higher than that, so it's a little bit more than the 25, but it gives you a ballpark range when we start to get it to the point where we're looking at dollars and cents and trying to figure out, which decisions we make. So I ran these 5 scenarios for you. The current cost of living, the CPI index, is really in flux because there's not a lot of data out there right now. They just can't get the data, so it's very incomplete. What I have is that it says that the CPI is a negative 0.4%. But again, there's a big caveat on there that says this is just the data we could get, this is the result. So I'm guessing as we get through the summer months and get a little more structure back into our daily activities, we might have some better information there.
Jenny, did you say these numbers included, they do include step increases?
They do, yes.
Okay.
I made the assumption that that was a baseline assumption the council would want to incorporate. So yes, they do. Now for health insurance, we have received our renewal information from our insurance agent. And so for 2020, just to recap, we have our single and family contribution amounts per month. Single is at $782.25, and our family is at $1,207.75. And the city contribution increased 5% from 2019 to 2020. For our renewal, we have 3 plans through Medica. Our premiums are age-based, so it's a little bit of a challenge as far as comparing apples to apples when we're looking at how do we, the differences for each employee can be different potentially just because of the age-based premium, I'll say. So it's not an across the board if you have the 2000 0% plan that it's at 8.75%. It could be 4%, it could be 12 or anywhere in between that kind of thing. But as an average for the 3 plans, the increase was 7.41%. Certainly not the worst year we've seen, but we're all, I think, experiencing the continued increase in health insurance. That can be frustrating and a challenge to, continue to figure out how we make the dollars work.
How many employees take advantage of the health insurance plan that we offer? All of them?
No. 15? 17, wow, 17.
17?
17. 17 employees plus families, if that's an option. Yep. Thank you. So the average dollar increase per month, if that helps to just give perspective, is just under $90 per month increase to the cost, the monthly premium costs. So I did the same thing for health insurance that I did for wages, and I came up with 3 scenarios. So I'll go through them very quickly just so you can orient yourself with the information. So option 1 was to increase the city health insurance contribution by 5% like we did last year. Option 2 was to increase the contribution by $50, just a flat $50, which we have done in years past. I think it was either $25 or $50 that we've done that.
What is that? Wage percentage? 50 bucks.
Percentage on what?
But what is the 5 per increase it by 5%?
Or maybe, because I was going to ask something similar. No, I don't know how to ask it. Is the current, so if you increase by 5%, what does that cost compared to the 50 bucks?
So
Average cost.
So it would be 5% increase over what our total contribution was this year.
5% increase on the dollar that we contribute per month.
The average premium for everybody's 5%. Everybody gets a 5% bump in their contribution.
Correct. Which is
Variable.
780. No, it's 782.25 for a single, or 1207.75 for a family.
So the 5% at max is going to be about $60, $65, right?
60.39.
Correct. So here, and maybe this is, it's just
Yeah.
here. So it's the dollar increase for single and family. It's right. It's right here. So 39.11.
Yeah, so 65% is 63 on the family and whatever.
Yep.
Less on the single.
So that gives you a perspective on the $89
Right.
average increase. So sorry, I was slow to pick up on that question.
Oh, well, you had
Yeah.
the answer right here. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm going. I'm sure it's here. I'm just trying to process the question. The third option is using that average of the 3 plans, the 7.41%. It was a different way to look at it, and I appreciate it was Maggie's suggestion to do that. Trying to come up with different ways because of the age-based premiums. Everyone's increase is slightly different. Just how can we give ourselves options to see what works? And on a given year, one option might be better than another. But you can see, so then the focus for the council probably that's helpful is that last percentage under each option. So for the 5% under the general column, it's 0.29%. So that is the increase to the budget if you were to opt to increase the contribution by 5%. Does that make sense? So to make sure that you're tracking or that I'm making sense.
That's the overall percentage in relation to the overall budget.
Yes, yes. Correct. So the first two, 5% and the $50, are roughly comparable percentages to our budget. The 7.41 is a little bit higher at 0.43%. Though actually I was pleased to see that it was under a 0.5% increase there. So I thought that was an interesting and certainly an option to consider. Excuse me. One thing I did do, and I didn't mention this on the wages side of things when I had that screen up, I did include in my preliminary numbers an extra full-time employee for our sewer fund in our sewer department. We've had very preliminary conversations at Public Works about what the timing might be for adding an employee. And that's not even something Tom and we haven't sat down and talked about budgets yet. But I did include it. I wanted to have some numbers in there. Again, I'd rather kind of put everything in there and then work back than to not have something and work through that. So I did include it. It's in the enterprise fund category, so it's not in the general fund. So that doesn't impact our general levy. But I just wanted to mention that. And we'll definitely talk more about that over the next couple months as we work through kind of the right timing for that. I provided our levy history for you. It's interesting just to always kind of reflect on a couple times a year. I did do a 10-year average calculation, and the 10-year average for our levy increases is at 4.1%, which I thought was a very reasonable and appropriate number over a long stretch of time to see how the city has grown. And so I thought that was a positive piece of information, and I wanted to share that with you.
It's gone up a third over 10 years.
You can look at it that way, yes. I think the last, question? No? Okay. The last slide I have for you is just some information on our fund balance. So at the end of 2019, our fund balance was at 4.86 million. That's 2.25 years of worth of expenditures, roughly. What we should do, and we'll work on doing before the end of the year, is the city should establish a minimum fund balance policy. And so we'll work to do that. I think the appropriate amount, in my opinion, is to have 1 year's worth of unassigned fund balance that we use for cash flow and for managing the annual operations of the city. And then the question really is, what do we do with the rest of it, and how do we purposefully use that over the next certain number of years? So I did.
Let me ask the question a different way. It's about $4.3 million in the fund. Some of that is already allocated to other things, right?
No.
Yeah, well, you're going to take out well, explain it to me. I thought we used some of the money for the fire engine over here and other things like that, so we don't have the whole 4.3 available to us.
Yes, that is a part of this, although in the 200,000, 50 has already been paid back. So we're in a really short amount of time. We're going to have that sort of taken care of, and that's going into our public works equipment fund. So we won't put that back into the general fund. We're going to use it for other purposes. That will.
So how
stretch it out.
much do we have that's not ticketed for some project or some item right now? How much is available to us to use in any way we see fit?
Well, I would say roughly the 4.8. I mean, if you want to say 4.5, that's fine. I mean, it's, at least you have a,
But the
Ballpark.
4.8, you're taking out 2.3 on 4.8, right?
well, that's what I'm trying to explain. So that is part of my suggestion, is that we would leave 1 year's worth of expenditures for our just general operations. And then I just put together a laundry list of the things that we're going to be working through projects over the next 20 years, roughly. And how can we thoughtfully use that money? Because it's really hard to put the money back once we've used it. So we're in a fortunate position to have options. And there are probably things I missed from this list or that you would like reallocated. Again, just food for thought at this point, but it would also be great for us to start to assign funds and really be purposeful with them to say, we'd like to set this aside. Now we don't have to look at it for now and you know, focus on the projects that are more in the short term. So.
Of this list of items you have here, is there any way to kind of prioritize them?
Sure. Can definitely do that.
Yeah.
Yep, I can do. I'll have that for the next meeting.
Might be helpful.
Okay.
What's that?
The roof on the ring.
Oh,
I don't see
nice
that
Rink.
on
I
the
missed
list,
that
though.
one. See, I told you I'd miss stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what I prepared tonight. I was hoping to give you a little bit of information and then just get some feedback. Keeping in mind, we have two pieces of the overall process, our budget and our levy. So if you're looking for changes, my question to you will be, are you looking for budget changes or levy changes or both potentially? But that would be what I would ask. So questions, comments?
Doesn't one kind of have to do with the other?
Possibly. I mean, so you could, in theory, you could budget however you want to budget, but still want to cut the levy
Oh, right.
5%. And we're going to draw down from our reserves.
I get what you're saying.
So that's why I want to make sure if it's cut the budget, that really cut the budget, or is it, are we looking for a levy impact, not as much a budget impact?
But if you use the money from the unallocated fund, so if we say we don't increase the levy, all zero, keep it flat, and any increases we take from our unallocated funds. And so we don't once, eventually, the levy is gonna have to catch up to what the extra money we spend. So in other words, if we spend $50,000, if we budget 50, 60,000 more this year, but we don't levy for it, we just spend down the funds from the account. Eventually, we're gonna have to levy for that. If that, or keep using money from the unallocated fund. Eventually, some point in time, that has, we gotta play catch up.
But the,
Or cut it from the budget.
Right, I'd agree.
John, you're kind of going where I was. Take a look at what you normally do on the budget, and you're going to come up with, say, 3 or 4% increase for next year.
Yep.
Then my idea was to take that 3 or 4% and make it a minus 3 or 4%. Take the money out of the unallocated fund one time, 1 year. In my mind, the unallocated fund is there for emergencies, pretty much. And I think this virus thing is really an emergency. A lot of people have lost their jobs, or they've been cut way back in hours, and they're really hurting. A lot of things have gone into problems this year for people making payments on mortgages and everything else. I would suggest we take 1 year and take the unallocated funds and reduce what we would normally ask for in our budgeting process. And then I understand what you're saying is that if you do it for 1 year, well, how do you make it up? You don't make it up for 1 year.
Yeah, I don't know that you have to. You know, if we spend 100,000 out of the general fund, we just have 100,000 less.
You've got $4.3 million sitting there, and if we're not willing to spend 100,000 or 150 or whatever the number is for 1 year to help people out in a time like this, I think that's what the money's for.
this is big numbers, easy to 5% of the 408 or 4.8 million, 240,000. Not an unsubstantial, but if we got it,
Yeah. One-time shot to help people out, and by this time next year, a year from now, when the economy is back up, hopefully, and everything is stabilized, we'll be better able to look at the budget a little bit different next year.
So-
That's what I'm thinking anyway.
In that scenario, thinking out loud, would it be correct to say, I mean, to make that easier for the future to work, you're really holding your budget as flat as possible?
Mhm.
Because if your budget keeps growing, your levy needs continue to rise. So if you don't,
My point is, if we normally do what we do every year, and this year in December, you come up and say, we want to levy 5% more than we did last year. I'd say, take the 5% and bring it to 0, and then go 5% negative. So we're 10% lower for what we're asking people for in terms of budget money.
So cut 5% from our current levy. Right?
It's a discussion, yeah.
I don't know, but 10% is it?
Well, it's for discussion
I-
of principle.
Because eventually that 5% has to get made up, but it brings you back to where you were before you cut it. So you have to cut the levy 5%. So that's where the 10 comes from, even for spending.
I think it's a good start.
Yeah, I guess as far as guidance to the department heads, you know, I think we're all in agreement with Don is saying that we can try to give some relief. I think that'd be good. So try and keep increases as close to 0 as possible on the budget. And then we can have discussions on how that affects the levy and what we want to do with the levy.
Okay.
Fair.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring out the principle and we work,
Yeah.
argue about the numbers later.
Perfect. I do have one other somewhat related item that I wanted to get your feedback on. So currently, the way our health insurance contribution is set up is that if the city contribution is more than the cost of the premium, the excess is put into an HSA for the employee. So they still get the full contribution, but it goes into an HSA. We are trying, Jonathan's done a great job at trying to look at providing other options for employees with other types of benefits. So dental would be an option, vision, those kinds of things. If an employee has funds that are currently going into an HSA, but they would like to opt to enroll in a dental plan, does the council have any issue with those funds being paying for that plan instead of going into the HSA? It's basically just reallocating the dollars.
I wouldn't.
Okay.
I wouldn't, as long as the employee realizes that their dental plan is more than they have going in there.
Yes, they'd pay the difference, or yes, absolutely. So I figured there wouldn't be an issue, but just wanted to toss the question out there in case there was the same money. The city's paying the same money regardless.
Use your HSA for a dental.
Basically, yeah.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. Trying to come up with some new options, so.
When do we need to,
Can't, oh, I'm sorry.
when do you need to renew health insurance? And
Great question. I didn't mention that. So the staff needs to have their selections into our insurance agent, I believe by July 20th. So by the July meeting, it would be really helpful if we have some good direction on what that might look like, because then they can make decisions on what plan they need, if they need to change anything. We have a September 1 renewal. So before August 1, they have to have all those forms in. Yep. So we're in an off cycle for that. So we will bring more complete budget information for you in July, so you can use that and hopefully give us at least a direction for what the city contribution might look like.
Is there any way in the future that you can line those up fiscally?
Well, the issue with doing that is if we're on a January 1 renewal, we won't get rates until September, October, and by then our preliminary budget is set. So now at least we have some information before the budget's determined, but there's always the 4 months, September through December, that whatever increase happens, the employee absorbs all of that, just because our contribution chain doesn't happen until January 1. But yeah.
When was the last time we shopped plans for city?
We do that, we've done that every year since I've been here. 2 years ago now, we switched from Health Partners to Medica because the rates were much higher for Health Partners. But we do look at all the major carriers every year to see if there's better options. Anything else? Otherwise, we'll have a few minutes before our regular meeting.
Get a motion to adjourn? Second?
Sure.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
yeah, fantastic.